Hi, I'm Kim Fairminer, and I'm here with Sam today from Three Fates Astrology for a deep dive into the Aries Ingress chart for Australia. This chart sets the tone for the year ahead, and with so much planetary action, including a powerful solar eclipse in Aries, we're looking at a dynamic and transformative period for the nation. In this discussion, we'll cover the key themes of the Aries Ingress, how those themes interact with Australia's political landscape, and what they might mean for the upcoming election, which is only weeks away. We'll also explore the country's economic outlook, international relationships, and even take a sneak peek at the more stabilising Cancer Ingress chart. Sam brings insights from Bonatti and Abu Ma'shar, while I'll be connecting astrological themes with current events and political trends. It's a fascinating conversation that blends traditional techniques with real-world applications. Before we get started, be sure to check the description for links where you can get in contact with both of us. And if you enjoy astrology discussions like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future videos. Let's dive in. Hi, Sam. Thank you so much for coming on to chat about the Aries Ingress with me. We're going to be looking at the chart for Canberra and having a look ahead at hopefully the year ahead for Australia. That's what, people come to the Aries Ingress chart for. But we have a cardinal sign rising in this chart, so it's only good for 3 months.
Thank God.
Yes, yeah, it's kind of one of those charts, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, so I popped the chart on screen so people can follow along. I'll try to circle the things that we talk about as we go, as not everybody may be familiar with all these esoteric symbols on our screen at the moment. But there is such amazing information for our collective experience for as Australians, the nation of Australia. I always prefer to actually kind of like limit my busybodying, my astrological busybodying to my own country, the country that I know about, because I think coming with an understanding of what the country's going through, what people are talking about, what's been in the news is kind of important, because this chart doesn't like plop out of nowhere. Modern Australia has been around for, more than 200 years. And by modern Australia, I mean since the British invasion. Obviously, Australia's got a much longer history, but as far as applying astrological charts to it, it's a relatively short history. And here we have the Aries Ingress of the Sun. It was a couple of days ago from when we're recording. It actually happened on the 20th of March, just after 8 p.m. We take the nation's capital, which is Canberra, and at that time that the sun returned to 0 degrees Aries, Libra was rising, and Libra is, of course, a cardinal sign. So this chart, cardinals, the cardinal signs are the ones that get things going and move things forward. So there's a speed and a propulsion to them, I think, that is probably what's behind the ancient mundanes astrologers thinking around why this chart only has a shelf life of 3 months. Do you have any references for that, Sam? You're our bookish astrologer.
I think, I think it's fairly set in stone, but I mean, I've been reading Bonatti and Abu Ma'shar, and they all reference the cardinal signs as only having a 3-month limit in a wheel of the, or in a revolution, a yearly revolution. So I'm not sure why it is. Maybe it has something to do with the fastness of the signs, like the cardinal being quite fast moving in terms of like its energy.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's I'm just thinking while you were talking, they're kind of like runners, and the cardinal ones that get things started, that kind of sprint out of the gates and get things going, and perhaps the fixed signs are the marathon runners, the stayers, the distance runners, and then the mutable signs are the ones that like get that burst of energy at the end and throw themselves over the finish line. So we've got like this fast chart. Libra rising. So, the associations of Libra, peace, harmony, justice, and quite interesting when we're looking at the chart of nations, the rule of law. So I think this Libra rising really spotlights the sense of civility and the social rules as far as what's happening within Australia, but also because these charts don't just describe Australia inwardly looking, it describes our relationships with other nations as well, and who we are and how we're functioning in the global context. So relationships in terms of our relationships with other countries is also an important thing. So that kind of desire for peace, harmony, tranquility, like civil discourse is something that Australia as a country is really craving right now, I feel, with that Libra rising. And the planet that rules Libra is Venus. So I'm taking that as the planet that kind of guides our collective experience for the year ahead. And we've got her over here under the beams with the sun, which means that these priorities of the ascendant are going to be challenged by other parties. We can get into the condition of Venus as well, but I just wanted to invite your thoughts on that on that ascendant point, Sam. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think having Venus there is definitely pointing to our shifting alliances, um, our priority on who are our alliances, but also I think it also has a lot to do with governance, especially given the weight of the chart and the way the chart is set up. With Venus being in Aries, and then the Lord of Aries is that Mars up in the 10th house of government. So yeah, to me, I think, yeah, I mean, honestly, Venus can't be in any worse condition than it actually is in.
Yeah, that's true. She's like, let's just have a look at what's wrong with Venus, or like what her
Yeah.
challenges are. She's in detriment in Aries. She's in the sixth house. Like she's what's the maths there? That's 15 degrees away from the descendant point there. Like she doesn't have any kind of angularity. She's well under the horizon. She's retrograde and she's combust within that 8 degrees of the sun. She just kind of doesn't have any oomph. We're being swallowed up by the sun, by those larger collective events, perhaps.
Yeah, so I mean, the sun is traditionally the prime minister, or the king, in
Mm,
the older texts. So it definitely feels like, and the ruler of the chart or the ascendant usually talks about the country as a whole, right?
yeah,
And so it definitely feels like the people, the common people, and the country are definitely kind of overruled by the prime minister in a way in this chart that's not necessarily for good at all. It's what is interesting to me with this Venus. As we've spoke before, I actually am also looking at another planet in the chart as being the ruler of the year, but they actually both really tie in together. But what's really interesting about this Venus is, she is going to be retrograding across all of these planets right down to like 24 degrees Pisces before she stations and turns direct again. So I
yeah,
think that can tell us a lot about what is going to be happening
yeah,
as well.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
so she'll meet with the sun and have that Kazemi moment halfway through her retrograde, and that I think, you know, does carry some kind of purifying energy, so, and brings perhaps clarity of a new direction and a new message, so the country will maybe kind of wake up, a new dawning, to what the prime minister or the leader of the country, because of course we're coming up to an election and the prime minister is not set in stone. So maybe that speaks of the renewal of the government with the election. And then like there'll be the meeting between Venus and Neptune, the conjunction to the North Node, and yeah, the meeting with Saturn as well. So that kind of to me brings a somberness and a kind of, I guess, a degree of fantasy and delusion in the sign of Pisces with Neptune there, which is really quite making a statement at that energetic degree before it crosses over into Aries. Like it's like all that accumulated desire and hope and like everything that, you know, we wanted and accumulated in our kind of imaginal world, like what we wanted for the country, is going to shift and change. Like those dreams that we had are going to be let go, and something new is about to be started, and it's going to start this quarter.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is an election chart more. I think this is about the election. Yeah, the more I've looked at it, the more I've just gone, just, you know, because of Mars, you know, with, you know, just kind of hopping away from talking about Venus for a second, but using Bonatti's rules, it's a really long drawn out, and I don't know why I just went down a wormhole, like going, oh wow, okay, he's got these really specific rules about how to find the ruler of the year. And basically you know, you look first to see the Lord of the Ascendant, and he says that you can't have a combust planet as Lord of the Ascendant, or under the beams or retrograde. And so then there's this really long drawn out process of then finding the exaltation ruler of the ascendant, which is Saturn, and Saturn's in the same position, you know, he's combust. So you can't use that. And then you start kind of going through triplicity rulerships, bound rulerships, and then also, you know, using the ascendant and the MC. And so basically, because in this chart, the only planet that actually has any power apart from the sun, which will always be like that because it's an Aries Ingress, is Mars. And Bonatti basically says you have to, unless in very, you know, very, I guess, rare circumstances, you could use a Venus as the Lord of the year. But it is Mars. But, you know, Mars ties in with this Venus because Mars is the ruler of Venus in this chart, and Mars is the ruler of the sun. And so I kind of feel that's why I kind of thought, okay, I feel like this is a change in government or something big around governance with Mars in the house of government. And really interesting. So and I really hope it's not the case. Because I'm not a fan of Peter Dutton.
No,
but
no, yeah. He doesn't seem to have very many policies at the moment. People keep asking me, he's just got nothing. It's a bit embarrassing.
Yeah, I think I've had a quick look because I don't really follow politics that much, but I have been increasingly over the last few months since Trump got in, because I'm like, oh, okay. Because I remember, you know, once that Pluto moved into Aquarius, that's when really a lot of things started changing then.
So
with
I think
Jupiter.
it's super interesting given that changing kind of geopolitical, all the stuff that's going on internationally, and obviously we'll get deeper into that as we get deeper into the chart. But the way that this Libra rising and using those Bonatti rules, you kind of had to like search for the planet that
Mm,
like leads Australia. Like, where
mm,
are we going as a nation? And having to kind of dig for that planet that steers us, and then settling on Cancer to me kind of shows that it's not easy for us as Australians, as a nation, to be making our path in the world at this point. We can't direct our destiny because we're kind of scratching around for like a lead planet, perhaps a leader, perhaps, the clarity of what we want as a nation state. Um,
mm.
I
I
also,
mean,
yeah, that Mars really dominates the chart for the reasons that you outline. Is angular, and it is the boss of the Sun, Venus, and Mercury, as well as the sector that the seventh house ruler that rules our allies. And yeah, the situation with international political alliances, allies, and alliances that have stood for decades are really being questioned at the moment.
mm,
Yeah, for a variety of reasons. The wars in the world are, I don't know, they seem like they're more enduring. Like, there's truces, there's just talks about peace, but it's really just a gab fest. And people are still unleashing weapons on people in Palestine and the Ukraine. They're the two ones that sort of, are so often in the headlines here. But of course, like there's wars and conflicts happening all around the world. I caught a little bit about the situation in Sudan, and there's been some major shifts with the balance of power there, and some soldiers took control of the presidential palace, I think it was, and
mm,
yeah, some really big shifts in the world happening that are, really being fought with guns and violence. And this Mars, I think, shows that this does have a presence, this idea of emotional instability and emotionally driven violence, that tribalism that tends to come with Cancer, is that idea of homeland, which is a theme in the Ukraine thing, and also a theme in the Middle East. It's affecting the decisions we make as Australians,
mm.
and
I
it's
kind of when
heavy.
I, yeah, it's a really heavy chart. Like, there's no
Mm,
way to sugarcoat this chart. Like, um, I mean, I think that, there's a few things that kind of saving us from, I mean, like it looks really terrible, but Mars is square the ascendant descendant. Mars is the ruler. So, what is this about? What is this Mars about? It's
mm,
about money, banking, trade, and it's also about land, because Mars is the exaltation ruler, and real estate and agriculture, because Mars
mhm.
is the exaltation ruler of the fourth house, but
Yeah,
also it's the exaltation ruler of the opposition leader. And so I kind of feel, so that's another reason why I was like wondering, is this going to be a hung parliament, or is this going to be like a really close election? Personally, see why anyone would choose him as a prime minister. But
yeah.
I feel like the people who are in control aren't the Australian people, in this chart.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree with that. Even the position of the sun, you mentioned at the start talking about the sun as the, symbolic leader of the nation. He's down there in the sixth house. He's kind of, in that servant role and being totally dominated by this angular Mars up there. The way that I looked at that Mars was more as, yes, the second house ruler, so that money. It was super interesting how you mentioned the exaltation ruler. Mars is the exaltation ruler of the fourth house, because that also brings in resources and mining. So I think there's something quite hidden about what a lot of these trade conflicts are about. And I'm just thinking, like, I do follow politics, perhaps like some people follow sport, even though it's got much more significant consequences than the result of the last Broncos game, that's for sure. We have the moon here in that house of income, money, finances. So this is a really and it rules that 10th house as well. So at the end of the day, this is perhaps, like a lot of this stuff, is a land grab. And in the recent first sort of solly in the trade negotiations, because Trump is like changing a lot of his he's changing a lot of everything, but one of the things he is putting tariffs, and tariffs on Australian steel and aluminium imports was something that was in the news as kind of like a taster of what's likely to pop up in this quarter. Apparently there's something called Liberation Day that Donald Trump's talking about, which is about the main suite of tariffs and controls, import controls that he's looking at bringing in. So this is a major story in Australia's relationship with a trading partner. And one of the negotiating things that our government tried to get rid of these tariffs on steel and aluminium was offering a deal on critical minerals. So the things that supposedly we'll all need for the future to make batteries, for electrification, to, rein in carbon emissions and things and critical minerals were also mentioned in the supposed peace deal with that the US was organizing with Ukraine. So this idea of resources, and Australia is quite rich in resources, but in this chart, those resources aren't important. If you look at straight up, the ruler of Capricorn over there is Saturn in Pisces. It's not really kind of doing much. It doesn't have like a lot of value in this quarter for us. And perhaps that means that our sales aren't going to bring in the windfall that, we would like. And interestingly, that moon, that income planet in the second house there, and Saturn there in Pisces are both ruled by that Jupiter over there in Gemini, which isn't a strong placement, but it shows that money. And I think more broadly, we're talking a lot outwardly about our, alliances and trading partners and things, and that is important. But this Moon Jupiter thing also speaks to how wealthy we feel. We want to splash the cash like a good second house moon, but it's actually Scorpio ruled. So there are collective realities that are limiting or overshadowing, perhaps is a better word, our ability to be as free with our money as we'd like to be. So yeah, cost of living.
Definitely. I think that it's really interesting that Jupiter, there's so much going on here. Like Saturn in we're using Bonatti's rules, because Mars usually indicates war, right? Especially in a place like the 10th house, and squaring, ruling lots of parts of the chart. And he pretty much says that, Mars in the 10th house. But I think that Mars's trine to Saturn, because it actually hasn't reached Saturn yet, and usually that is the indicator of war, is if Mars is, you've got to look to see who is Mars separating from. So I'm not sure, have these tariffs happened yet
The
with
ones on
Australia?
steel, the ones on steel and aluminium have, but like that's, I don't know, we're like some piddly percentage of imports into the US. And the US isn't our biggest customer for steel and aluminium either. So it's kind of small in terms of percentage and probably income in the big scheme of things, but it's seen, I think, as symbolic of what can happen to other industries. There's also been a lot of pressure, and because we're recording this just a few days after the Aries Ingress itself, there were a couple of amazing headlines on the day of the Ingress. So this, I think it was like on the Thursday and Friday, I had a look at the ABC website, and this international pressure, the pressure from our ally, who's kind of dominating things up here. The two headlines that I noticed was Labor and the coalition vow PBS, that's the pharmaceutical benefits scheme, will not be bargained over in US trade war. The other headline I noted was Tech Titans asked Trump to take up fight against Australian regulation. So interesting that you mentioned 10th house as governance. I don't know in modern times, like the times we live in, like, yes, there is war, but I think Mars can also indicate conflict. But in those headlines, the first one used the word war, the second headline used the word fight. And that really kind of frames, I think, the experience of war that will unfold in this chart. Like, yes, we are affected by the wars that happen, overseas, but we're going to be in our own trade war. And the ruler of that 10th house is this moon in Sagittarius in the second house. So I think it will be over like buying and selling. It will be over these rules of trade that a petulant trading partner is ripping up and going, well, we want a new deal. So yeah, I also think interestingly, particularly about the PBS coming into it, the sixth house is, which is really has a lot of emphasis with all those planets in the sixth house, is connected to healthcare as well. So it's likely to be a definite area of activity in the coming quarter. So hospitals, caring professions, Medicare, and also that pharmaceutical benefits scheme seems to fit in with the narrative that's begun exactly on this day with lobbying from the big pharma, as they say in America. They're not happy that the government uses its buying power to reduce the price of the medicines that they want to sell at a premium price to Australian consumers.
Oh, geez, it's so sad, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is. But yeah,
I mean,
cultural differences.
well, it's really interesting. Like, I'll just kind of circle back to what I was saying with the Mars Saturn. So
Yeah, sure.
because Mars hasn't separated, so usually in terms of war, you see who started the war. But I think that really things haven't I think things are going to be, changing with that Mars a lot, with that Mars squaring the ascendant. But I don't think we're going to see, or maybe we're just going to see the initiation of, or maybe just the initiation of things, maybe just the talk of things at the moment,
Yeah.
because Mars hasn't yet separated from Saturn. And so that is actually what you want to see in a chart for an actual conflict
Yeah.
to start, to begin, right? So you want to see it. So, and it hasn't reached there yet. And also the moon hasn't yet reached an opposition to Jupiter. So there's a feeling that things are just starting. You know what I mean? Like we're just in talks at the moment, but it's definitely not looking great.
No.
The ruler of Pisces being that Jupiter in the 8th house, which is talking about the income of our allies, is definitely saying, and also, this links into the eclipses that are happening too, which I think are really important to talk about before we're having an eclipse on the 29th of March in Aries at 9 degrees Aries, which I think is really interesting because it's very, very close to these planets, to the ruler of the ascendant, and also to the 7th house. So Bonatti says if the lord of the sign in which the eclipse is going to be, which it is in Aries,
Did you want to
and
bring
the
that
lord of
chart
it
up?
is Mars. Can you see that?
Yes, I can. You got a lot going on there, but that's fine.
I'm pretty intense with my chart. Ingress happens in between two eclipses. So we had the lunar eclipse at the 14th on the 14th of March at 23 degrees Virgo, which I find really interesting because that basically happened in opposition to Saturn there. So I do feel like this chart, the Aries Ingress does have a lot to do with eclipses. And then this chart is a solar eclipse happening at 9 degrees Aries. Bonatti says if the lord of the sign in which the eclipse is going to be, and that is Mars, because Mars rules over Aries, were the same as the lord of the year, which it is because, I spoke earlier about Bonatti's rules about finding the lord of the year. It does signify detriment is going to come over the common people of the year. And this will be in effect until the sun reaches the degree which is the ascendant of the eclipse. So that's basically
a long time.
when the sun. So that's around December this year. And so that's why I think this chart was talking about not yet, but it is going to happen. Like things are going to start ramping up then. He also goes into looking at, so the ruler of the year, using the ingress was Mars. You're also going to look at the sun because obviously the sun is the prime minister, and also the moon because the moon is the people. But when you're looking at eclipse charts and comparing them to the ingress, you always use the ascendant ruler. So you want to see if the ascendant ruler is making, what kind of aspects it's making to Mars, what kind of aspects it's making to the sun. Is it being harmed or is it being helped? I did like that Jupiter in this chart is in the 7th house again of allies.
I was like looking at that, and also the Mars is in the 8th house, which brings in that kind of trading relationship again.
Yeah. At that point, Mars is getting pretty close, but not yet, to Saturn. So let's see what Jupiter's doing. Jupiter isn't in great shape, but at least it's making, the sun, moon are making a sextile to it. So what does the 5th house have to do with it though as well? So
pleasure, kids, the arts, sport, gambling.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting to see how what happens there. I think it's also interesting to have a look at that Saturn, because I found another reference to, that Saturn North Node conjunction. So Abu Ma'shar says the conjunction of Saturn with Rahu signifies impediment in the substance of the sign in which they were joined. So that's Pisces. So there's going to be Pisces problems. So
Mm.
So he says because, and you know, the ancient astrologers or medieval astrologers, they very much looked at the signs and whether they were animal, whether they were human, you know, and they also looked at you know, like especially for the ascendant. And so this one kind of says it could have to do with um animals who spend time in water and those that are of use to humans.
Salmon. Salmon has been in the news.
Has it?
Yes, there was a big like what do they call it? It's hideous. A mass mortality event where all these salmon in a certain farm in the Huon Valley, I think it was Huon salmon, and they were the one salmon farming place in
Really
Tasmania, possibly Australia,
fascinating.
that was certified by the RSPCA. And because of what's happened around that mortality event, how they treated the fish, and yeah, there were dubious things about mixing dead fish and diseased fish with like healthy fish. Like it was just a mess. It's been all in the news. And it's like this kind of mini election issue in Tasmania. But like it's strange that we have all these massive kind of decisions to make around the defense of Australia, trading partners and alliances, and everybody's talking about fish and if we can still eat Australian salmon. Like, is it
Right.
ethical and healthy? And
That's interesting.
yeah,
That's super interesting because that's what he says. And it's also he also says because they talk a lot about the weather too when it
mhm.
comes to eclipses. um, because they say the eclipses really, you know, do affect the weather. And it shows tempests in the sea and the breaking of ships. It shows working class rebellions against employers and the harming of small animals. So, I mean, good to see the working class rebelling against employers,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah. That is
But
a theme of the Ingress chart itself, with the emphasis on the sixth house, is like the everyday worker as well. Yeah, I mean we're all just trying to get on, aren't we?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I like to see that Venus, even though she's in trouble there, um, she is at least has some you know uh, dignity via exaltation.
Yeah.
So she is there's something about this chart that kind of empowers her a little bit, and she is joining with the North Node too, which usually increases benefit.
Yeah, I
um
think it shows she's trying to do the work to bring about a peaceful resolution to whatever we're talking about, whether that's salmon, whether that's international trade, whether that's bringing up the birth rate, perhaps. That's another thing that the fifth house rules. And it looks like people aren't making babies as enthusiastically as perhaps the government would like us to
yeah,
do.
I just stopped my sharing.
Okay, so we're back on the Aries Ingress chart here after that fascinating look at the eclipse, which happens just 9 days after this Ingress chart. And it's a solar eclipse, so it is super relevant. And I loved how it showed those similar themes around trade and alliances, and also showed us that Mars aspect to Saturn getting closer. I hope it's not like guns a blazing war, Sam. I think to me it feels like a trade war. Like it's
Yeah,
hostility, it's conflict, but I don't think anybody's going to shoot each other over the negotiating table.
I don't think
Right,
so
trade
either.
ministers at 10 paces.
Well,
um,
it's you know like the ruler of that Mars is the moon in the second house.
yeah.
For war to be signified, usually Mars has to be in an aspect with either Jupiter or Saturn,
Okay.
because right, the superior planet. So the slower you know, so Mars has to be separating from one of them for a war have to be decided. And
Okay.
because Saturn here is in the sixth house, um, you know, and that moon, the ruler of it,
Mm.
in the second house, I definitely feel like this is more about um government changes, trade, and agriculture. Because Saturn naturally rules over agriculture, is ruling the fourth house of agriculture and farmland, and is in the sixth house of like animals as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it kind of feels like, mineral resources, money grab.
Yeah. It sure does. Like, yeah, just trying to get more of what Australia produces for a cheaper price. Yeah. Okay, so we've added a few sort of extra items and references and things to this Aries Ingress chart, so we can get a little bit deeper into how the planets are interacting. What have I got here? I've got some notes.
Oh, you've got a super nerdy chart like mine.
Look, it's not quite as nerdy as
Love it.
yours, but these things provide like some interesting information, and you don't need to work your brain as hard. I particularly love the little application, like the degree map that really helps to work out.
I love your Arabic parts too. I'm going to have to add more.
I'm pretty sure this is just the standard solar fire horary thing, if anybody wants to have a play with it. It's really useful for like not just horary though. I mean, this is the mundane chart. So yeah, I always like to see how other astrologers set up their charts, and what they put in, what they put out, and how they look at things. The essential dignity table there too, that's the Ptolemy one, which Lily would have used, but I periodically go off on spirals. Which terms and essential dignities should I be using? It's all a bit much. You can go down these weird rabbit holes. Okay, so the things that struck me is like, yes, we've got that trine between Saturn and Mars. I don't delve too much into original text at this point of my astrological journey. That's a later thing for me. But I really appreciate astrologers that do that work and bring little snippets that can be worked in on an as needs basis and just kind of sprinkle it over. So I really love what I've learned from the Bonatti tips and the Abu Ma'shar tips that you've shared today, Sam. Like, it's really good to think about, particularly that ruler of the year and how that's changed. And the Aries Ingress is all about the sun. So I think I went on dove into the sun is busy here. There is a lot of close aspects. So I think that kind of means the prime minister or the leader of the nation has got a lot of like balls in the air, a lot of plates that need to be kept spinning, particularly coming up to that election. Whether Albanese continues in his role as prime minister or if he hands over to Peter Dutton, which, yes, frankly, seems inconceivable given like his policy positions or lack thereof. The way actually I see Peter Dutton is I see him as Saturn. And I don't think this Saturn, if we do look at that table of essential dignities there, you can see Saturn here, and you go across as like, -5 in, raw scores. And perhaps the moon, interesting. It's also got a -5 as the leader of the government. So yeah, minority government is something that's been talked about. I do think one thing I did note in this chart is that the fact that the ruler of the 10th house, which means is another way of identifying the prime minister in a chart. If this is the government and this is the opposition, we look to the planets ruling those signs. And we've talked about Dutton being seen as Saturn, one way of looking at that. And that means that the ruler of Cancer, the 10th, is the prime minister. And I think perhaps that, the moon also being the mood of the people, that the prime minister and the people being of the same mood about the cost of living, about having, a financial plan. We want to feel wealthy. We want to have fun. And things just kind of aren't feeling as flush as we'd like them to. And it's largely due to international pressures, what our trading partners are doing or threatening to do, and the instability and uncertainty that causes. I think instability and uncertainty is a massive theme because so many planets are under the beams of the sun. So, like the topics of Mercury, Venus, I think Saturn is right on the edge of the 8-ish degrees for being under the beam, or combust. Combust is the correct term. So this Saturn is just like barely visible, but Mercury and Venus, which are the planets that rule legal matters, our partners, finances, direction as a nation, as well as our hidden enemies. I think that's kind of, our alliances having the, and hidden enemies, the South knows it's hard to know who is an enemy and who is a friend. And sorting that out at the moment is a theme of this Ingress chart. So yeah, with that moon, the Prime Minister knows the mood of the people, and simply based on that shared signification, I would lean towards the change of government being unlikely, because the people believe the current government is more generous with cost of living relief, and that's what people care about.
Definitely.
But
Yeah,
there's
that's
a hell of a lot more going on behind the scenes, that perhaps the Prime Minister's not sharing, that the people aren't ready to hear and deal with about those hidden combust topics.
I definitely think the current Prime Minister is being shown in a much more generous light than the opposition leader in this chart.
Yeah.
Like being the moon in Sag, definitely kind of feeling pressured by this Jupiter in Gemini, but not yet come into complete conflict over it yet. That moon is waning in light though, but the next aspect that the moon makes is actually going to be to Mercury, which is what you were talking about before. What is the ninth house? So that is
Legal matters and agreements. So I think potentially that is the paperwork around our alliances, the agreements. It's also, to go back to that headline I wrote, that I read out, it's international travel, but in a way, I think it's also
shipping.
like the internet and media companies. Like, yes, they're third house, but that also, with Jupiter being in Gemini on the cusp of that ninth house, that again points to the third house as well. So I think perhaps those media
This could be
regulations.
immigration,
Oh my
this could
gosh,
be
immigration, of course.
So
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a really hot topic soon that maybe is going to Albanese is going to need to address, because we all know how that's gone in the past.
Yeah.
And it's definitely something Dutton is using as on his side. What
He
else
loves
did
to
I
be the
think?
hard man too, Dutton. So I think that Saturn, is quite perfect. Like, I don't think he actually is hard. I think that's like just image and bluster. I think honestly he's a little bit overwhelmed by that Saturn with the North Node and pretty close to Neptune. Like, haven't seen anything. Like, yes, he comes across and like, yeah, we're gonna, kick out dual citizens, we're gonna do this, and like we're hard on borders. He's just looking for a 3-word slogan that is gonna bring people to him. But I think the Pisces with the detriment of ruler Jupiter, it just brings like kind of like a softness. It makes me think of a cactus. You know, when you've got a cactus and then you overwater it and it like looks like it's fine. And then one day it just like you discover that it's rotted out in the middle and it collapses.
Yeah.
This is what I see that Saturn and perhaps Peter Dutton as like spiky on the outside, but like not a lot of substance if you poke it. Yeah.
Yeah, like really conservative, but caves easily to, this Jupiter,
Yeah.
and the wants of, so for me, I think it's really interesting, and maybe something we haven't concentrated on enough on is like all of these planets in the 6th house. Like there's a big glob of planets there. Like that is
Massive.
really definitely speaking to health and the PBS stuff. And I wonder too if it is going to be connected to our animals or to sheep or to, because, Aries is the ram.
Mm.
So I'm wondering, I have been seeing things about bird flu and stuff like that. So popping up. I know it has been going on for a while, but yeah, I definitely think the PBS thing is going to be a thing. Maybe Medicare, maybe talks about, um, the costs of public health and all of that.
I'm
But
just yeah.
sorry.
I'm seeing Saturn there. I wonder, like, the Greens talk about like dental being brought into
Yeah.
Medicare as well. It's like it is a bit of a strange anomaly. Like, Medicare will take care of everything except your teeth. Um,
I know, so weird.
Yeah, like
Just
the Liberal Party's come out with a health policy, shock, an actual policy. I saw it on something I watched last night, that including psychology. So I think it was 500 million or something. Yeah, they're proposing to bring under the banner of Medicare or health spending in some way. So yeah, maybe that could be something that brings them some votes, given that the moon is applying to Mercury, the planet of the mind. Perhaps.
yeah, I think the only other thing that really stuck out for me, I think that it's the part of fortune here is in the 5th. We've had a few things pop up about the 5th house, especially with the eclipse chart. Having the part of fortune in the 5th, it is making a square to that Jupiter. I do feel like that's, not I do feel like that's kind of a good placement. There's a
Yeah.
nice, because of the trine with the sun moon here, we've got a nice trine here.
Yeah. It's
See
actually a
the
trine from the part of fortune to Jupiter as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, trine. Yeah,
Yeah, you said
bit
squares,
small
but
on
I
the
thought it
screen.
like, yeah. It's a friendly aspect.
Yeah, so that's cool.
It
Yeah.
is cool.
Um,
Yeah, with the 5th house, that Pluto right on the cusp there. I wonder if that speaks to the scandal that's emerged about childcare centers, because the 5th house relates to children. And there was some investigative journalism done about basically for-profit childcare centers like not having qualified staff and basically abusing children while they were in their care, like sexual abuse, like physical abuse, restraining them, force feeding them, like hideous, like plutonic stuff. But like there's so perhaps childcare and expenditure on childcare and hopefully proper regulation, because one of the things that emerged was that these centers weren't being assessed enough to catch these kind of things, and that there's basically like whole like childcare centers that haven't met minimum standards for the whole time they've been in operation. But the economy, that part of fortune, that money health planet, people rely on that service. But there's some toxicity there with the Pluto on the cusp.
I think the thing that we have been, Jupiter, that's a pretty nice helping hand there from, maybe there are going to be there is, some of this money that's being offered is going to help those kind of things. There's also that trine between Jupiter and the ascendant too.
Yeah.
So there's definitely benefit coming there, even though it's in the 8th house and it kind of feels like, like maybe it's not a lot of help because Jupiter's not very powerful, but there is at least some benefit that we are going to be getting out of these changes and alliances that are happening.
Yeah, that would be good, because we do need something good. And the 5th house is, where we have our fun, where we make our babies, where we have a laugh, a good time, play a bit of sport, play a game, board game. And I think with Venus in close proximity to the sun in this solar ingress chart, like, that's what we want. Like, we just want to have a bit of fun and, I guess stretch our legs and have a bit of a laugh and enjoy life. But there is a lot of, I think, barriers in this chart to the things that we want to dream of. And maybe it is, like with those Pisces planet, a bit of an escapist fantasy, and that the world has changed, and we can't go the way that we'd hoped. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Just that Mars is actually joined with fixed star Castor.
Okay, tell us about Castor. It is.
So he's the twins, Castor and Pollux, and he's kind of connected to Cain and Abel and all of those old Bible stories, right? And so this is another reason that I was like, ooh, is this going to be a hung parliament? There's that like that Gemini energy, the twins energy, the lovers card, like that choice that we have to make between one or the other. And it is talking about the opposition leader. Mars with any of the fixed stars is hardly ever good, right? It
Fixed
shows
stars are
people
temptation, aren't they?
Yeah, they're usually like this. Honestly, when you look in the ancient books, hardly any of the fixed. There's only rare fixed stars that are good, and usually, but if you put a malefic with them, that can still make them bad.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's hard to read the fixed stars stuff, but yeah, Mars in Castor actually shows the star itself was kind of unofficially named the ruler yet to come.
Ah.
Yeah, so that's in Vivian Robson's book. I kind of feel like
You're tipping Dutton for the win.
oh God, I really hope not. Like, honestly, I'll be so happy if I think he could come really close. I don't know. Like,
we'll have to come back and look at the election chart, maybe get the two leaders charts and look at the close of polls. I do love a close of poll chart. And the election hasn't been announced yet, but it has to happen by early May. I think the 12th is the last possible day that it can be held.
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah. There is one chart. God, that's so ominous, Sam. Please don't. You've just dropped.
I know. I'm sorry, everyone. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, I can't see how I'm actually surprised I'm even saying it, but like, I mean, Mars, because I really don't want it to happen.
No.
Not that I think any.
And maybe that reading, Sam, will make somebody watching really, really happy.
Yeah.
One thing that fascinated me about that Mars is I was like, who is it? And you've delved into Bonatti and, you're seeing that as the exaltation rule, it could be good for the opposition, but I think we'll regret it because Mars in Cancer isn't, super functional. Yeah, I looked at it as like, well, what if it's one of our allies? Like, who is that Mars? And then I'm like, the US is a 4th of July, that's Cancer season. So I popped up the Sibly chart. I'm going to stop this share. Okay, so what I've done here is I've taken the Ingress chart for Canberra and I've put the US Sibly chart around the outside. I am not sure if this is a legitimate way of working with, mundane charts, but I just could not get away from this Mars. Who is that Mars? Who is like the, basically the enemy of Australia, the one that's giving us the hard time? And that popped into my head. And then I did this and I went, OMG, like, look at that sun, the ruler of the US, just kind of like, on the midheaven of Australia. And also the US Saturn is on fairly close to the Ingress ascendant. So I feel like the
And the moon,
changes.
the moon on the ascendant of there.
Yeah, like
Chart.
they're really kind of upending everything at the moment. Like all the, things that perhaps other nations have taken for granted, but I don't think we are going to be popular or special as they, talk about that special relationship that Australia supposedly has. Well, we're special, but it looks like for all the wrong reasons at the moment. So the way that I saw that is that like solar, with the sun and Saturn on Australian angles and their ascendant on our moon. Like it's like the US is seeking to dominate and command Australia right now. And that is for the coming quarter. And I also noticed that the US Mars here is on that Ingress ninth house cusp. And I've just written some notes here. We feel attacked through the US media and like I'm thinking like those like Facebook and Twitter and all that kind of that big tech type thing with that Gemini-ness. That US, those big media companies and laws, that ninth house emphasis, laws like trade agreements and any negotiations with the US are likely to be verbal and vigorous given that little connection there. So I think that there's some difficult conversations between friends ahead regarding that. So I just, I'm wondering what is going to, come out. And it could be that there are more Cancer countries, more countries that connect in with the Australian chart, not just the US, but obviously there's some pretty major stuff going on in America with its alliances and trade agreements that do affect us as one of their trading partners and defense alliances. And with that Mars so strong, it's all very fluid and changing quickly in line with those cardinal angles.
Hey, could you swap the chart so that it's flipped
Yes.
so we can see?
Sure. The Ingress chart's on the outside and the US chart is on the inside.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, look, so that spotlights the Jupiter a little bit more. Wow. And remember that Jupiter was in the 8th in the Ingress chart for Australia, but on the 9th house cusp. So they look to be rather interested in us at the moment, don't they? Like because the US
and look at this, all of that, ninth house, all that 6th house stuff
is down in the 3rd
and 4th.
So
yeah, so
wow.
That's agriculture and land again. But the 3rd house, so 3rd house is It's actually, I was actually wondering because with the Ingress, there was a lot of third house stuff that kept on popping up, but like that's just our usual news and um,
Mm.
so
Media monopoly.
internet.
Yeah, so anyway, I just thought there's a bit of food for thought. And I just think that this relationship, our relationship with America at the moment, is very active. It's quite volatile, quite changeable with those mutable connections. Yeah, super interesting because they like, no, we don't want your critical minerals. And so in that steel, aluminium attempted negotiation, we're like, we're taking our critical minerals and we're going home. Yeah, but they are perhaps more interested in us than they're letting on. I mean, obviously, the with the sweeping changes that are happening in America at the moment, like they've obviously got a lot on their plate and many interests around the world as well as internally in their own country. But it just shows that we are definitely part of those conversations. But yeah, I don't think it's always nice to be talked about while you're not there and yeah, not privy to those. So some interesting things going on with that retrograde Mercury, which ruled the 12th house, so all that behind the scenes, those thinking now of that bald guy in Game of Thrones, the Master of Whispers. I think the Masters of Whispers will be working overtime in the ninth house was diplomatics and borders as well, diplomatic channels and borders, or maybe the fifth house. Fifth house was also diplomats, if I'm not mistaken, like intermediaries.
What's
Ah,
interesting in this chart is that in both of the charts, I might be being biased now, but I am noticing a pattern. Is the
mhm.
sun was falling from the descendant, which is usually a sign of someone falling from power. But at here we've got the sun right at the which
The
always
ice.
happens during an ingress anyway,
Yeah.
but with the against the US, which is actually quite interesting.
Mm.
So every Aries ingress, that would be happening for them.
Yeah.
Wonder if that's got something to do, maybe I'm rambling now, but wonder if that's got something to do with the way that how often they change presidents. Like, I'm not sure about the laws in.
Oh. Oh, you mean that sun coming to their IC?
Yeah, constantly, every Aries
Oh,
ingress.
it would do that.
Hmm. Just a
Yeah.
off topic kind of.
Yeah, it is. But like, this is the thing, you get into these charts and you see all these things and you have that little kind of like, I wonder. And then you
Yeah.
do it and it's like, holy moly, look at that. I did just want to finish off because we've been talking for about an hour and it's a lot. And yes, Sam and I didn't super love the Aries Ingress chart. It looked sort of challenging for like all those reasons. Like there's lots of hidden stuff, confusion, there's hostilities, largely from outside, and also uncertainty around the election result. But I think I'm definitely going to come back and have a look at the election. Maybe I'll just put it on my Facebook page. We'll see how we go. But I did, because that chart is only live for 3 months, so it runs out in June. I wanted to share the Cancer Ingress chart to show that there are better days ahead. We get the Libra rising again, which kind of, is a continuation of the story. But what I really loved about this chart is that the sun was very close to Jupiter. And Jupiter loves to be in Cancer. So, and also to the moon is sextile that sun Jupiter as well. So this looks a lot better. It looks like
Mm.
we've kind of, or like as far as like government goes, that somebody's like capable, somebody's smoothing over that those seventh house difficulties, and those ninth house troubles around immigration, borders, and alliances. Perhaps being worked out, being resolved. There's, you know, the moon's exalted here, Jupiter's exalted here, there's a sextile there, it's received. Like just on that, like there's a lot more to love. So
Venus is in really good shape.
yeah, so I don't know, maybe somebody gives us some money, maybe somebody buys something really, like, you know, sweet from us and we make some bank.
But that is also, I think that's going to be the Saturn Neptune conjunction too. So when
Yeah, well,
so
there is the square there. I didn't want to talk about the square, Sam. I
sorry.
wanted to focus on the good stuff. People need to, like, you know, come back to this
Yeah.
to like, but it's not so obviously difficult and shady
Mm,
and like cranky like the other one. Like
yeah.
there's better
It's
stuff.
definitely better, but that's definitely much more nice, you know,
Yeah.
more comfortable.
Yeah.
Some deal has happened that is definitely working for us.
That's what I reckon. Whatever's come up in that Aries chart is resolved in the Cancer Ingress quarter. So like light at the end of the tunnel, people, perhaps a happy-ish ending. Yeah, so we've got yeah, something to look forward to. And you know, an election to keep us busy in between. So yeah, we will maybe come back. We'll see how we go. So much to talk about always. Thank you so much for bringing your insights and wisdom to this chat, Sam. If you want to get in touch with Sam or you want to get in touch with me, our contact details, websites, yada, yada, will be in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Yeah, follow us on the socials as well. And yeah, we'll be back. We'll be back. Yeah, subscribe to this channel and there will be future chats between me and my wonderful, knowledgeable, lovely friend, Sam.
Bye, everyone.